Welcome to this week's episode of the Success Realtor Podcast by yours truly, Colleen Wood. Here is where we celebrate success in real estate and share the wisdom and struggles so others can be successful too. If you are a new listener, I am the producing branch manager of the Wood team at Hometown Lenders, and I am known for helping realtors to earn a lot more money in commissions without selling their soul to the industry and while maintaining balance with what's most important in life. I am thrilled today to be in the presence of Realtor great Bryan Buhr. Bryan is a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Premier Properties out of Fargo, North Dakota, but lives across the river in Minnesota. In the last year, you closed $10 million in real estate with the average price point of $500,000. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I've had so much fun researching you. You have so many different facets of your business that we're going to dive in today. We're going to be talking about new construction. We're going to talk about your special lake property market and video marketing in both the Minnesota and North Dakota markets while living in Minnesota. That's very exciting.
It is. It is. That's what's nice about real estate. You get to kind of funnel into what you enjoy, and especially the marketing is what I'm really passionate about. So it's good to see that other people are noticing.
Yeah, it's hard not to notice. And what Bryan was explaining to me was that with being just across the river, how those markets are just very much joined, how most of your agents are dual licensed in both North Dakota and Minnesota. That's not common for us. So that was very exciting to talk about right from the beginning. So Bryan, let's just dive right in. Tell me about your background in real estate. How did you get started?
Yeah. So I guess the main thing that got me started is just even in high school and college, I always worked with a local builder, pounding nails, realistically. And it was one of those things where that's where I got a ton of construction knowledge. You know, even summers throughout college, I would work with him. And he did a few projects where, he would have to hire realtors to either a quick flip or a spec house.
Sure.
And it was one of those things I just felt like he wasn't getting the service that he probably should have been getting. So it was always in the back of my mind. And basically, after I graduated college, my wife, you weren't married yet, but we're now married, was the first one to get a real job in the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
So we moved down there, and I basically, I had some money saved up. And in Minnesota at the time, it was 3 40-hour classes to get your real estate license. So I started taking classes in January, and by February, I had a real estate license.
Wow.
No experience, but I had a real estate license. So
well, I think
that was February 2010.
Okay. So 2010, but you did have vast experience because you knew that there was a service shortage with the contractors that were providing these houses, that they just weren't getting the service from the realtors that they needed. And you already came into the industry knowing that there was a level that you needed to hit in order to do a good job with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it did. And I would be totally honest, it took me a long time to get going. And that was part of it. Just we moved around quite a bit.
Sure.
Once we moved back from the Twin Cities to the Fargo, Moorhead and Detroit Lakes area, I was able to, I think about 2015 or 16, mentally change in my mind. Like, I'm not a construction worker that also sells real estate. Like, I just made the change in my mind. Like, okay, now I'm a real estate agent and I happen to keep working construction until I was able to move out of it. But it was some lean years. I think that taught me a lot. Like, it really does. Like, when you think your plate is full, there's always more you can do. And honestly, like, you have to really commit to get over that first hard barrier. That's why so many people fail in real estate the first few years. It's hard to get that first reputation. People are trusting you with a huge sale.
Yes. That's so important for people to hear that it is hard to get started and to get your reputation going. I do feel like, though, that there's so many realtors out there that do not have any working knowledge of how a house is put together or be able to see the issues, construction issues, settling issues, mold issues, how things were maybe not put together well. And I think that, that's part of your expertise, that you can walk into a house and see potential construction issues and notify the buyers, or even if you have a listing like, hey, this is going to need to be taken care of before you get buyers in here, because this is going to be a problem that's going to come up in inspection.
No, absolutely. And the big thing too, even I would say, especially, if you're working with a buyer that is doing a new construction build, it's nice to be like, you're kind of in their corner but you're not in competition against the builder. It's more you guys are working together. Like that's what we're getting paid is we're, you know,
Mhm.
the idea is we're taking some time off their sales team. We're solving some of those problems for them. What's nice for me is if I can notice, a small change right away,
Mhm.
it's usually easy. It's easy to like, oh yeah, we want to
Right.
change this closet. You can make those small changes to make a house custom for someone really
Oh,
early in the process without extra money.
that's amazing. So you are primarily in the Minnesota market, but also in the North Dakota market. And your states have seen a huge influx of people coming in for lots of reasons. But, that certainly the oil drilling that was happening was a big part of it. We saw a ton of people moving to North Dakota area specifically for the oil drilling. What does your market look like now? Are you seeing the same demand for properties or is it a different buyer?
I think we still have the same demand. I know obviously everyone talks about interest rates and that is going to price certain buyers down into different ranges, but there is just still a huge demand. There is a lack of good quality inventory. With the oil money in, we had more, I guess, I would say families that were maybe getting royalties, like especially in the Minnesota market,
Oh, sure.
families that had North Dakota land, all of a sudden they're getting royalties and they don't want to leave North Dakota because it's a really tax friendly state. So,
Yeah.
maybe we're buying a condo in Fargo and then we're also getting our lake property in Minnesota. So it
Mm.
is cool. It is really neat to meet people like that. And um, I really like it because a lot of times they're normal.
Yeah.
They're people that have always worked hard and all of a sudden, came into a good situation and are more grateful and just really excited.
No, I know what you're talking about when you're talking about normal people because some people are just our people. And I've learned too, even as kind of adjusting my locations from being not as, I'm very much in Bozeman with my business, but I don't live in Bozeman. I'm more eastern side of the state now. And I'm really seeing there's a big change in the type of person. So I'm a little bit closer to you now. And I'm loving that demographic. I'm also have sent a lot of people. I mean, it's no lie that the prices in Bozeman and Western Montana have gotten so out of control high that, it's just really hard for your first time home buyers or your one income families that, you get more than one child and one of the spouses has to stay home because you can't afford to pay for daycare and work too. So we're seeing a lot of one income households that are young families and they just can't afford to be in Western Montana. So, I've been sending folks your direction and I'm excited because we were talking off air that your price point is a lot more affordable. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, our average price point in the Fargo Moorhead market is right around 300 or right below it, depending on, the month. And so that's so interesting to see that from you, where you see that as low and we see that as high because we've been having more and more people move in, pushing prices up. Kind of a situation where, say, for example, the Twin Cities, we rarely used to have people relocate here from the Twin Cities. Well,
Wow.
now after COVID, they can keep their job, work remotely. Obviously, you understand keeping your job makes it way easier to buy a house,
Yes.
pre-approved, but they keep that Twin Cities type income and then can move here where everything is a little more affordable. Personally, I feel like we have better schools. That's my personal opinion, obviously,
Sure.
but there's a lot of benefits to that. And no, and I get what you're saying too, like with the daycare. My wife and I, we have 2-year-old twin boys, and our
Oh,
daycare is more than our mortgage right now. So
yeah.
it is hard to get started for sure. But I do tell people like absolutely try to find a way to make it work if you think this is an area you're going to stay in for more than 5 years because people might think prices are going to drop some with the interest rates, but realistically, we have so many people moving to our area from other parts of the country that aren't doing so well.
Mhm.
Other parts of the country where 300 grand looks like pocket change.
Yes.
Prices here are going to stay pretty stable, in
They
my
are.
opinion.
They are. And we're going to talk about inventory in just a couple minutes too, because you're right. The prices are not forecasted to go down. Interest rates are expected to normalize a little bit. What's normal? Maybe in the fives would be great. But, the demand for real estate, especially in our Midwestern section of the world where people can keep their San Francisco wage and work remotely and, have a home by the lake in Minnesota and have all the things in life. So that demand is still very much there. So, new construction. That's a humongous part of your business. You have this builder background knowledge. It's very easy for you to assist people with new construction and navigating that. But it can be really hard on families, especially married couples. So you and your wife managed to build two homes together, both of them on a lake. What advice can you give to families and realtors guiding families wanting to build their own home?
I would say the biggest thing is to really take a lot of time thinking it, really have realistic expectations up front. You know, you're not going to get through a new construction build. Even I would say from the time the foundation's dug to when you're done, it might only be a few months, but plan on the whole process realistically being at least a year or more.
Yes,
Um,
for sure.
take as much time as you can in that design phase. I know a lot of people want to blow through design because they just want to get a lot locked up and they want to get started.
Mhm.
And sometimes I would say if there's one thing that we need to keep our builders or their salespeople from doing is like, yep, let's get it locked up and let's get a contract going. Let's spend more time in design because
Yes.
that is going to resolve so many headaches along the way. And it's one of those things, as long as someone has a really smooth experience, they're going to enjoy their house.
Yes.
If it's a bumpy road, you're going to live in that house for many years. Like, say you have a window issue,
Mhm.
every time you look at your window, like it's going to trigger you and remind you of that. So as long as you just have things planned out, it can go so much smoother. And I guess that is where you need to work with someone that has the experience to know what you actually do need to plan out
Mhm.
versus let's just get the design. Let's start picking carpet. Like that's so minimal compared to,
Yeah.
you know,
I feel like people get that anxiety going and then they just start shoving it through because they can't stay in that anxiety phase very long or, arguing with their spouse about things, know that there's a lot of decisions that are going to go on and you guys are really helping navigate. I love that you're saying about slow down. And I'm sure you're encouraging your clients to say, hey, we don't have to decide this right this second. Let's talk about this. Let's go and look at some samples or let's look at some examples of homes that are built this way and see if there's one that you're leaning towards. My advice to people is decide which part as, either the husband or the wife or, whatever it is, like what of the rooms in the homes or what of the things about the build is truly very important to you personally. Like, as I'm totally stereotyping here, but as the wife, is the kitchen like, is that your sanctuary? Okay, husband, let her do the kitchen. If the garage and, the den is your jam, okay, wife, let him navigate that. And, have kind of your areas that are going to be yours to really lean into, but, maybe don't have to like co-decide on every decision is so hard. It's so hard.
no, absolutely. And it is, and it might be a somewhat of a stereotype, but I will say from my personal experience, it was, I know when we built our first house, it was, I think it was even just maybe it's a simple paint color or something, or maybe it was
Yeah.
just trim. But, my wife made that first decision. And then it's like, okay, well, every decision that goes on throughout this, you just take
Yeah.
because you have a vision, and that's where I guess we worked really well together, where I look at houses more of the structure and the utility and
Yeah.
the use of space and the design stuff. Like I appreciate it, but like I said, it's not my jam. So if I don't care that much about it, I should shut up about it
Right.
realistically.
Right. I just feel like any sort of missing communication pieces that are already existing in your marriage are going to come out in the wash in a construction. And it's hard to watch on my side of it, on the lending side of it, because you can see it. So make sure your marriage is good and strong before you start
Right.
that project.
No, but like I said, and back to the first point of figuring out as much as stuff on
Mhm.
the front end is important
Mhm.
because if you kick that can down the road, well, now you're making that decision on a timeline. And
Yes.
that is way more stressful than, hey, let's take as long as we need to figure this out.
Right, right. So, I mean, the elephant in the room, the cost of construction. The
Yeah.
cost of construction has really slowed the builders down. We've seen builders like with poured foundations just absolutely stop in their tracks on building homes, which is super scary because we have such a demand for people to buy homes. We have nowhere near enough inventory to put everyone into a home, especially with this, male age. They're coming into 33, the age of 33, we've never seen such a big group of people wanting to buy homes, and we don't have the inventory. So we've slowed down construction, but the inventory problem is nowhere near solved. What do you think is the future of new homes being built in the next several years? Do you think that there's any reprieve in sight for inventory?
I think there is on the new construction side, and that's where, in my opinion, it might get a little scary. Is
Mm,
I guess the thing I'll say is, I will say on the new constructions, I feel like the builders in our area this time last year, so February last year, you wouldn't get a house in 2022. Where now,
mm,
February 2023, if you start the process, you can have a house complete. You can be in this year. So they're getting caught up for sure. A lot of, but flip side to that, I would say the scary side on my side is, even if we start catching up on that new construction inventory, I'm a little concerned that the existing inventory is not going to be there. Where if so, anybody that is smart has refinanced in the last few
yeah.
years. And so there's very little motivation to make a lateral move for, just for like a slightly bigger living room. Where before, if you had a 5% interest rate, and it's like, well, we're going to refinance anyhow, and I don't love this living room, it's pretty easy to justify that lateral move. And I think a lot of those people are going to be hanging on in the existing. So it's good and bad, I guess. The nice thing is, in my opinion, the building codes in North Dakota are, I don't want to say lax, because I think that they're really solid codes. I think Minnesota has maybe gotten a little crazy on some of their items that they require.
Yes.
And all those things are great and good in concept, but it pushes up the price if someone is trying to build it,
Mhm,
even a starter twin home. If you have to add all these extra things, that
mhm.
starts pushing up the price to people that are hurting most.
Yes. I heard a metric yesterday that 60% of existing homeowners have an interest rate of 3.5% or lower. And I mean, that is so hard to contend with when we're trying to encourage people to list their homes and do a move up property or move out to the lake, or just you can't even hardly get the numbers to crunch for them because their payment is so cheap. I talked to somebody yesterday and their house payment is $960. And, to encourage them to do anything different than that is just really, really, really tough. Yeah. So, if you have such a vast knowledge of custom home building, what would you advise a new realtor wanting to, get into some new construction? I mean, it's certainly on the horizon, but I see so many realtors who don't know the difference between soffit and fascia. How do you advise them to get started so that they're up to speed on this challenging market?
I mean, I would say that two big things. First of all, is find a way to get into houses as they're being built.
Mm,
We have in our area, we call it Parade of Homes, and the builders put on, kind of showcase all their new construction homes. And
yeah.
it's great to go that and see the finished product, but you're not learning that much. So find a way, whether it is, I mean, most builders will, even if you talk to a salesperson, they'll be like, yeah, you can go check out this property. And
Mhm.
if you don't have any construction knowledge, if you're there and there's a subcontractor there, don't be afraid to ask them questions of like, hey, how does this work? Why do you do that? Like, a lot of people don't want to seem dumb, so they're afraid to ask questions. And then,
Right.
well, but then you stay dumb. You never learn anything.
Mhm.
So I would say that's the big thing, is see houses being built. You'll start to see the pieces of the puzzle go together. You'll understand, oh, this is why that was there. And then I would say the other thing is the way the world is so connected now, like this, you're in Montana, I'm in North Dakota,
Mhm.
get on YouTube or something and you can learn anything. Like, you
Yeah.
really can. Instead of watching Netflix for an hour, get on YouTube, and if you don't know new construction, learn about foundation, learn about anything. I mean, realistic, that's what I'd say. Learn about a foundation, because if you, at that first foundation meeting, if you have something to bring there, all of a sudden the builder, the sales team, they're like, this person knows what they're talking about. They know about foundations. Oh my God. That might be the only thing you know, but at least in that first impression, you can say something and contribute.
You could almost educate yourself, like pick a house. I just got excited. Like pick a house, just like you said, know that the foundation is being poured. Educate yourself on YouTube because you literally can learn anything on YouTube. I love the platform.
Yeah.
Educate yourself on foundations, and then you see them start to put up, all of the studs and structuring the home, building out the initial frame of the home. Learn about framing. And then, so when you see that and you see, okay, the next thing is happening, and then go research that. And you could almost like self-educate yourself by just watching what are they doing next and asking, what is this called,
Yep.
and educating it. That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple, right? It's just putting in the effort, even like a sump pump. Once it's done, there's nothing to see.
Right.
But so if you can see that ahead of time, because when your buyer asks, well, why is that there?
Why?
What exactly does it
Yeah.
do? It's like, oh, well, there's this drain tile all around here, and then it comes and it lifts the water this way. All of a sudden, they're like, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I always laugh when you see the realtors doing videos, and unfortunately, it's mostly the ladies because the guys aren't wearing high heels, but I always laugh when I see the women in high heels and they're doing a tour of the construction site with the mud and all the stuff, and they're wearing these beautiful shoes. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Uh, huh,
Yeah, it's
learn the environment a little bit.
right.
That's really smart. That's really smart. Okay, so a big part of your specialty is in lake properties, which I didn't even really know because we don't really have. I mean, we have Flathead Lake and then we have some like smaller reservoirs and things, but we don't have the lakes like you do. But your specialty is in lake properties in both North Dakota and across your home state in Minnesota. So many lakes in Minnesota. How is real estate for these special properties different than others, and what nuances do you run into?
Yeah, the big thing that's really fun about it is, I mean, realistically, once you get 45 minutes into Minnesota, the terrain changes and there's a lot of lakes. So, I think in Becker County, there's like 500 lakes. In Otter Tail County, according to Wikipedia, is over 1,000. What's so cool is, when you're saying in Fargo, in town, everything is super flat.
Mm,
So, there's no walk up, there's hardly any walk up basements. Where a lake, everything is so different, even from one spot to maybe a couple hundred yards down the shoreline. You might have a flat lot versus an elevated lot. It makes it difficult for people to learn and price. It's a longer, more intense learning process, I guess.
mhm.
But I love it because they're all so different. Like, you get to tell the story of every individual property. You get to figure out why this property is better than the one 2 houses down. And that's why I really do like the video marketing, is because we get to tell the story. I think it's super helpful because, you know, if we're marketing that property out and a buyer's agent, say a buyer agent from Fargo is going to show a lake property I've listed,
Right.
I'm going to know more about that lake and that property than that. But if they have a video to go off of,
Oh,
well,
that's
one,
so
they
helpful.
they can learn the highlights and talk educated to their buyer and look good for them,
Mhm.
which creates trust, gives us more offers. Then when you talk about how connected everybody is, I mean, I've had 3 transactions in the last year where we received offers from out of state buyers
Mhm.
that have never even set foot in a property.
Yep.
They see the drone, they see the shoreline. They have their own agents and boots on the ground too. But stuff like that's exciting, where instead of now my market is, few 100,000, now I can truly target the whole country.
That's amazing. That's amazing, and we're gonna touch on that next because that's a huge part of what you're doing, and it is separating you as video marketing. But I just wanted to just comment that you're so right about the lake properties. The things that are rolling through my mind are like access to the lake. How do you put your boat in? Where do you put your boat? What's the water like? What type of boating can you do? It, like you say, is it on an elevated lot or is it a flat lot? I know you guys are getting a ton of snow right now, and there's some concern about some flooding. Is flooding going to be an issue with all the snow melting and the lake line coming up? Those are things that you would have to know the property. And as an agent that's coming in, like especially from a place that's flat like Fargo, trying to show that property would be really hard, really hard.
Yeah.
Or,
No, and that's where growing up doing the building, like, I did get a huge advantage because we built on so many lakes. And I mean, and I grew up there. I grew up in Frazee, which is a small town outside of Detroit Lakes, so we spend time on most of these places. But it's even just, if you don't understand how much more valuable a 200-foot flat lot is versus a 200-foot elevated lot, like, think people don't wake up with $2 million or $3 million. Like, those people usually take some years to accumulate that wealth,
Mhm,
and then they're hitting the age of steps start to become a pain. So
mhm. Sure.
there's only so many flat lots and there's a ton of people fighting over them. So
Wow.
if you just grab a market analysis and you say, oh, this 200-foot lot sold for 300 grand, my lot's worth 300 grand, and you can't realize like, no, the numbers don't tell you the whole story. You're going to overprice, you're going to chase the market down. There's a lot of bad.
That's why computer real estate's never going to be a thing, because how would a computer ever be able to tell you all of those things that you need to know? And that's why there has to be boots on the ground. So let's dive right into it. Video marketing is such a big part of your background and a foundation of your business. You do listing videos of all of your properties, no matter the price point. Lucky sellers that are able to have that. What do you think is the most important part of this type of marketing for real estate professionals to be leaning into right now?
I think the listing videos of where someone is actually there explaining and telling the story of the property is a big, big deal, and yeah, we make some really cool lake videos, like those ones for people that aren't even interested in buying. They're fun to watch. But at the same time, if someone has a $200,000 twin home, it is a great tool to be like, why should someone buy this $200,000 twin home versus every other one that the floor plan is exactly the same? So that's where you get to start talking about location. You talk about like, we're this close to this park and we're this close to this freeway.
Yeah.
And it's something where I'm fortunate to work with some really good videographers, and we do have a pretty efficient system. And it's just one of those things where, yeah, it's something some agents reserve just for their high price listings. And honestly, like an extra 10% is an extra 10% for everybody. If you're in this income range, an extra 10% hits you as hard as, if you're an extra 10% in that upper range. So, and there's other things. Selfishly, it helps with referrals. It does, people see it. People like, oh, this person is putting actual money and effort. It helps,
Well, it's a no-brainer if you're shopping for listing agents and, one listing agent is not doing any video and the other is doing your listing videos like the one you sent me, which was amazing. I'm going to actually post it on my social for inspiration for local agents here, because I think it's really, really good. It's just a no-brainer for a seller to want to know that that's going to be something that's going to help sell their property. So, yeah, definitely. So, but there's so many different types of marketing out there that realtors have access to. It can be really overwhelming and they don't really know what to do. And they're trying to differentiate themselves from everybody else. So everything feels like the right answer. I'll just do everything. But
Yeah.
what do you think can be taken off the table in a marketing plan right now if you're doing some video?
I would say the biggest thing is print literature, like magazines. And I'm not going to say that no one will ever buy a house through one of those platforms, but what they cost versus the amount of exposure you can get versus video is crazy.
Yeah.
There was in our local paper in the Lakes area, there's a Lake and Home magazine that used to always come out with the paper. And I did not enjoy it because I felt like I had to be in there because everybody got it. But at the same time, any property that was any good and marketed correctly was sold before people physically get it in their hand, because there's 2 weeks of lead time. So
Yeah.
the print stuff can kind of go to the side. Now, print advertising in an actual listings, I think that there's a lot of cool things that you can do with QR codes and stuff that people can take it with them and really remember the property.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. I've stopped doing any print advertising, and I think it's upset a couple of people that I had a relationship with, but I just don't see the value of it, especially for you guys when you're turning those listings. Like, shoot, by the time they even go to print, the property's already sold. I mean, I don't think people are picking up magazines and looking at properties anymore. They're going online, they're going on social media. Like with your videos and the social media following that you're creating, people are seeing your stuff, even if they're not shopping, and you're inspiring them to even get out there and shop because your videos are so great. So that's really, really wonderful. So 2023 is already feeling like very different than 2022. What does success look like for you and your business for 2023?
Yeah, it's interesting to say I am strangely excited for a more normal market. So we've been talking about the video stuff, right? Like I've been doing that even before COVID, I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. And Was it necessary to sell many of the houses, especially this last year when everything was crazy? Like, was it absolutely necessary to get the house sold? You can argue it probably wasn't. Was it,
Right.
in my opinion, necessary to get the highest price? I think it was. And
Sure.
so I think where a lot of agents would look at it like, oh, I'm not going to drop that money on a video because I can get it sold anyhow.
Right.
It's fine. But now when things are going to be normal, you're going to have to start working again. And I'm excited. Like I truly am. I think whenever things are hard, there's also opportunities. It is going to be super hard for, like we talked about the inventory, first time buyers, but also a little slower market. Like they do get to take some time to, you get some time. You get at least a day now. If it's a good property, you at least get a day to see it, or people don't have to take time off of work to go and look at a house to
Stampede.
fight 30 people for it,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the analogy that you're alluding to, and I'm going to just put in a picture is that, you were already creating the video, you were already pedaling the bike. And then when the market shifted and everything kind of got easy, where the properties were flying off the shelves so fast, most people just stop pedaling. So it's like you're going downhill and they're just coasting. But you stayed pedaling. You stayed pedaling. So instead of just staying in coasting speed, you were getting better and better and better and getting more and more momentum. So now you've got all the nuances all figured out about how to do video. You have the team, you guys have the system. And now these realtors that weren't doing anything like that, now they have to start over. And because now they have to be competitive and they have to work harder. And you're like, yeah, see ya. Already been doing it.
right?
And you can work on something else that can make you better. So that's really, really exciting and inspirational to people that are thinking about how do they level their business up.
Yeah. And even too, like when you talk about the stopping and starting, it is nice because throughout that, we've always did listing videos. Have got a really good process with that.
Mhm.
I will say personally, a couple of years ago, I was doing some more educational videos that when our boys were born and time became crunch,
Yes.
I didn't keep up with those as I should have. And now that I understand what goes into like these videos, so I feel like we've the last few months been able to do like a research phase and come up with a good plan to like now make those efficient.
Mhm.
So yeah, I am really excited. I think it's going to be a fun year.
So you have a couple of places that you are posting content and posting videos. Can you tell us where our listeners can find you on YouTube and all the socials?
Yeah. And so my plan is to dive into YouTube really hard for a lot of reasons. I mean, realistically, the biggest one is YouTube is owned by Google and it's a search site.
Mhm.
So even just getting the listing videos and the addresses on YouTube helps them show up better in Google searches.
Mhm.
YouTube is kind of where I want to put all the energy and then use, Facebook and Instagram to drive the traffic to YouTube.
Mhm.
I don't have TikTok yet. I don't plan to this year, never say never if all of a sudden I can find a value to it. But also too, I mean, I take that back. I can see value in TikTok. I just feel like I can still get better at YouTube before focusing on something else. I want to focus on one thing really hard.
That's really
So yeah,
smart.
the easiest way is the channel is just called Better Through Real Estate. It doesn't search very well because it just changed the name of it from Bryan Buhr, Berkshire, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, there's over 100 videos there and a lot of the educational stuff still, even though it is a couple of years old, is applicable to today's market. So
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so smart. You guys go check out his videos, check out his marketing, get inspired, and then definitely figure out how to build a house, figure out all the nuances on how to do that so you can explain it and help people be able to do that because so many people are wanting new construction right now and we've got to create some more inventory. So it's definitely needs to be a part of your world. Bryan, thank you so much for joining me today. This was awesome. This was so inspiring. I feel like you and I could talk for 8 hours. You are such a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for your time today.
No, I appreciate it. I really appreciate you reaching out as well. I really, truly do.
You bet. Bye-bye. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of the Success Realtor Podcast. As a reminder, I'm the producing branch manager of the Wood team at Hometown Lenders. We are known for three things. Number one, we close on time. Number two, we keep our realtors in the sales seat at all times. by keeping them updated on their current transactions. And number 3, when you entrust us with a lead, we follow up on that lead until they buy, fly, or die. Leads are never lost to our lack of follow-up. Our number 1 priority is for you to earn more money in commissions so that you can improve the lives of your family, community, and in turn, our country. So, can I count on you for that next buyer lead? I would love to work with you too. Also, if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, please just reach out to my office. All right, we'll talk to you when you call in, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Realtor Podcast. Bye-bye.